Hi. Because this video is a little bit longer, I want to give a quick roadmap for where Pavan and I go in this conversation. We start with the four things that a publisher should be thinking about as they're moving from managed advertising to programmatic. Then we talk about some of the advertiser expectations around bonus and discounting in a programmatic auction. We talk about whether publishers should embrace private marketplaces or instead focus just on the open exchange. We talk about whether a publisher should be transparent in their floor prices. And finally, how a publisher should think about dynamic floor prices. Please enjoy. Hi, this is James Deaker. Often I'm the one asking other people questions about yield, but today we're going to turn the tables a little bit. And I am joined by Pavan Pai, who is going to be asking me questions about programmatic migration. Pavan is currently the head of yield and campaign optimization at Walmart Connect. Full disclosure, he and I have worked together at multiple companies in the past. We worked together at Wrapped, we worked together at Microsoft, and we worked together at Yahoo. So we go back a long way. We think a lot together, and hopefully that will come out in the conversation. So Pavan, thank you. Welcome. Is there anything you want to say to further introduce yourself, or do we want to get straight into the questions?
Well, James, always good chatting with you. It's my pleasure to be over here. I have enjoyed the video series that you published with some of the folks we've worked with in the past as well. Always good to see familiar faces. So James, you have a ton of experience in the space, and you've been lucky enough to see Yahoo transition from the guaranteed display offering into programmatic auction. So I'm hoping a lot of the folks watching this video would benefit from your insights, especially those who are in a similar transformational journey. So my first question for you, what are the top 2 to 3 things a publisher should be looking out for as they transition to the programmatic display?
Yeah, that's a question that I get a lot. And so let me start at the top. The first thing is that as a publisher or as a marketplace owner, the company needs to be aligned on policies and incentives. And I'll be explicit. If you have a sales team that is responsible for selling managed advertising, they are going to see programmatic as a threat. They will probably think that they're the only ones that should be driving revenue. So you need to ensure that there is a group outside of the managed sales team who is responsible for the overall health of the marketplace. And that group needs to have incentives that aren't tied to the existing shape of the current business. The second thing that you need to keep an eye on is ad quality. If you add extra partners who you haven't previously been doing business with, or if you have advertisers running on your site that you don't have a direct relationship with, it means that you run an increased risk of lower quality ads or fraud. And so you need to have a more active ad policy enforcement mechanism. And this is an area where, quite rightly, your managed sales team might look at the ad quality and look and point and say, look, it was better when we had a direct relationship with the advertiser. So you need to get ahead of that issue by having a strong ad policy and enforcement team. The third thing is thinking deliberately about what data is being passed to advertisers. You can say that you're allowing programmatic buying, but if you aren't passing the full URL in the ad call and not allowing advertisers to drop verification cookies, or not passing your understanding of the audience onto the buyer, you're going to have lower yields. Now, that doesn't mean that your initial response to each of these questions that I just mentioned should be, sure, I'll let the advertiser see that. There are good reasons why you may not. So you need to have a clear strategy around it so that when people come to you and say, why are we or why aren't we passing X data to the advertiser, you have a good response. And I'm going to add a fourth thing. I know you only asked for 2 or 3, but the fourth thing is to think about the role of the traditional managed sales team and the products that they sell and how you can set them up for success. because unless you're going to go fully programmatic, you have to have something for the managed sales team to sell that is differentiated from the programmatic product. And that could be a preference in the ad serving. It could be more data. It could be exclusivity or early access to some ad products. Regardless, it is important to be deliberate in your strategy. So there you go, Pavan. You asked for 2 to 3, and I gave you 4.
Always welcome to have more pointers out there, James. My next question. So typically upfront investments by advertisers have a lot of added value, bonus, discounts, etc. associated with them. So do advertisers continue to have these expectations even in a programmatic auction world? If so, how does a publisher incentivize them without affecting the integrity of an auction?
Yeah, another question that comes up a lot. And so first, let's give context for why advertisers or agencies have those expectations. And there are 2 main dynamics at play. The first is that in a non-programmatic world, so historically managed impressions, there weren't a lot of impressions that were sold. So you might have a 50%, 60% sell-through rate on your site. That meant that you had 40% of your impressions that were either going unsold or possibly going to a remnant channel. And so quite simply, the opportunity cost of those impressions was very little. And so it made sense for the publisher to pass those impressions on to their best buyers. But in doing so, they created the expectation with those buyers that they would continue to get these sort of free bonus impressions.
Yeah.
The second major dynamic is that agencies in particular are under pressure to show to their clients that they deliver value. And so let's tackle those dynamics separately. On the first dynamic, where just historically it's been a common practice, I think advertisers understand that programmatic is inherently more efficient and that in most cases, the winners are determined by auction. Therefore, they are realistic that there aren't a lot of free impressions and that programmatic is going to be different. However, on the second dynamic, the pressures on the advertiser and the agencies to drive efficiency have actually increased in the last 5 or so years. So, of course, they're going to push for anything that they can do to get an advantage over the competition. So what's happening in practice? What do you do about this, given these 2 dynamics? Publishers are having to walk this very fine line between ensuring that they have a fair auction that can be seen as a clean marketplace, but they also have to find a way to accommodate their largest advertisers. That means that they are still going to have to do an annual agreement of some kind. And as part of that agreement, it will likely have to focus on some form of bonus or post-auction discount. And depending on the tech stack and the publisher, this may involve some form of manual billing. And now that you've got me going on this, let me talk about one more thing that comes to mind. If you're a publisher who's got a programmatic business and a traditional hand-sold manual business, in the short term, you can probably take the incentives or the bonus that are earned on the programmatic side and funnel them over and redeem those bonus impressions or those accommodations over on the manual side. Obviously, that's not possible in a fully programmatic environment. And in a fully programmatic environment, then you have to have the question of, do you do something like a post-auction discount or manual billing after the fact to get those largest advertisers or agencies the bonus or impressions that they desire?
But do you think that would not have an effect on the integrity of the auction itself? Like if you were to issue post-auction discounts or post-invoicing discounts, what's your take on that?
It potentially could. And so a question that we may choose to get into is PMPs, the value of a private marketplace for your biggest buyers versus an open auction. Do you want to get into that now? Because I think that's a related topic.
Got it. Yeah, actually, yeah, it probably is a good one to actually talk about as well. I actually have a question lined up on PMP next. So What's your take on that? Are they a must part of the whole ecosystem? Like if you think about it from a waterfall perspective, typically it's a guaranteed delivery, guaranteed impressions that happen first before it actually moves on to the auction. Now, do you think that the space between the guaranteed and an open auction to have a private auction as well? And is that a must-have?
Yeah. So first thing to level set on is when we say private auction or private marketplace, which is code for, we may say PMP, that can mean lots of different things. Even though the concept of a private marketplace is well established within the industry, you could have a PMP set up in lots of different ways with just one buyer, or you could have many buyers in that PMP. You could have it running in parallel to your open market auction, or you could have it running first. You could have only some of the inventory is available through the PMP. You could have different floors in the PMP. And so the first thing to understand when people say, should I be doing a PMP, or how do I think about those, is to be very precise in what is the PMP that we're talking about and how might we configure it. And so I think, one of the questions is, should all publishers be exploring PMPs? And I have to say, from a sort of economist perspective, and I think my PhD was in engineering economic systems. From that perspective, I would much prefer one clean, efficient marketplace. And so for many years, I actually fought pretty hard against the idea of private marketplaces. However, I am a realist. And in some cases, advertisers want to be in a private marketplace for reasons that in some cases aren't entirely clear to me. Perhaps the management at the advertiser believes, either rightly or wrongly, that PMPs are somehow safer. Or maybe they believe, again, rightly or wrongly, that they're getting preferred access. Regardless, it's undeniable that the yield prices that come through a PMP tend to be significantly greater than through the open market. So if the question is, should a publisher be exploring a PMP, and does that undermine the integrity of an open marketplace? My answer to the first part of the question is yes. Publishers have to look at how they set up private marketplaces. And then the follow-on thing that they need to look at is, how do you have those PMPs coexist with the open marketplace? What is the difference in the floors? What is the difference in the priority in terms of the ad serving, etc.? But I think we're now living in a world where realistically private marketplaces are a must-have for most publishers.
Got it. Very insightful. All right. Coming to our final question, and it's a two-part question and related to pricing. The first one, what are your thoughts on transparency regarding floor prices? Do they have to be transparent, or is it perfectly fine for an auction house to keep them a little bit opaque and then let advertisers actually figure out what are those floors by testing out the rock bottom on their own, right? They have the means to kind of keep changing their bids and testing the floors. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, this is another one where I've changed my mind over time, and we're allowed to change our minds based on new information. My initial reaction a number of years ago was that as a publisher, as a marketplace owner, I should hide the floors. Like, why give out free information to the marketplace? But then I was confronted by the reality of how people buy. And buyers are in a hurry, and buyers are short-staffed. They don't have huge optimization teams. And they are very quickly trying to find the time to experiment and find optimal buying behavior. And either they see the performance that they need pretty much straight away, or they don't. And then they walk away. And so to enable them to understand what's going on quickly in the marketplace, it's generally, in my experience, a good thing to share the floors so that it takes one of the variables off the table if they're having performance issues. It's not because they're just falling short of some floor that you've set, and so they're actually not winning any impressions. Also, and again, it took me a while to think this through, the publisher doesn't really gain anything from hiding their flaws. And so from that perspective, yes, conceptually, you're like, oh, I don't want to give away anything for free. But in most cases, it's not like you see more yield or anything like that if you hide the flaws. And so, yeah, in general, I think that you want to be sharing the flaws. That you said you had a two-part question. If you said the second part, I'm sorry, I forgot.
No, actually, I haven't gotten to the second part. But the first, I just want to continue a little bit on the first, right? Is that common practice though? Like, yes, you come around to the fact that you want to be sharing those floor prices and being open about that. What's the actual common practice out there in the industry?
I can only speak to what I've seen because I don't know that there are many studies. But when we say sharing the prices, it's important to think about the fact that can be done in a couple of different ways. And actually, they have very different implications. So one way that you could share the prices is through a conversation. You could have one of your sales team say, especially if you've got very simple floors, you might say, we always have a dollar CPM floor on all of our billboard inventory. We always have a 50-cent floor on our 300 by 250s. And that may just be a principle to protect some of your inventory. And so you tell all your buying partners explicitly, like through a phone call or an email. The second way is that you can share it through the RTB protocol. And so in every call, you can be passing what the floor is that the buyer needs to exceed in order to win the impression. And they have different implications that we can get into. I think experience now, given the maturity of the industry, it's probably better to be passing it within the RTB call. If I rewind a couple of years, it was more common practice for that to be a conversation. And unfortunately, a conversation where the end result would be the advertiser wouldn't want you changing those floors very much over time, because if you said my floors are $1, they don't want the confusion around you calling up, the next week saying, oh, by the way, my floors have just changed. So for that reason, it's probably better now for publishers to pass those floors in the RTB call.
Got it. And in fact, my second part question was, it's a little bit of a loaded question though, right? And we're probably going to wrap up with that. Dynamic floors, is that ethical or not?
That is a loaded question. So let's start by defining a dynamic floor. And I think in the context of your question, it simply means that as a publisher or the marketplace owner, you are changing the floor on a regular basis. And you could change it every minute, every day, every week, or every month.
Through an algorithm. Most likely through an algorithm, yeah.
And in a broader sense, it's really just one part of what you would call dynamic pricing. And now I think dynamic pricing is becoming reasonably common outside of online media. You see it in sporting event tickets. You see it in a whole range of different industries. So I think people are comfortable that dynamic pricing is a thing that they can expect in certain environments. It doesn't mean that they're going to like it, but it is a thing that I think is expected, especially if you're clear about the changes. In most cases, if we're talking about a floor, and back to your earlier question around whether you share that floor or not, if you are changing your floors over time and you are disclosing what that floor is so that people aren't surprised, then yes, I think it's ethical. I think it might be challenging, I don't know about ethically, but certainly from operationally, if you were changing your floors and not telling anyone, because then, for example, you're going to see advertisers, their performance and click-through rates and win rates and everything is going to change considerably based on how you've been changing your floors. And if they don't have visibility into that, I think that they're going to get frustrated. And so it, again, increasingly common thing to do, but in my experience, hasn't necessarily driven the yield that you might think. I mean, everybody's, likes the concept of using this to drive a lot of yield. But again, a lot depends on how your buyers respond to those changes. And as I already mentioned, a lot of buyers like to set it and forget it. They like to have all their bids coming in at $1 CPM. And so even if it might be a little bit advantageous to them to fluctuate their bids, it's not clear to me that most buyers want to do that, have the resources to do it, have the sophistication to do it. And so I don't think, I do believe that if disclosed, dynamic floors are ethical. I would implement those well into the journey along a programmatic path. It's not the first or second or third thing I would even do if I was starting to go programmatic as a publisher.
Got it. And I guess a lot of it also depends on bid density, right? Like it makes sense to actually have dynamic floors, if at all, if there's like if the bid density is very fluctuating as well, right? If you have low bid density, maybe you got to like push up the floors. If you have high bid density, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Whatever floor you have, it's going to clear well above the floor at that point in time, right? So I guess that has a role to play in the decision as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
Pavan, from my perspective, we've covered a lot of ground. I'll summarize where we are, and then if you have any other follow-up things that you either want to promote or share, let's go there. But I think that the theme of your questions has been around some of the challenges of going programmatic. And I'll summarize by saying going programmatic is difficult. It can be worth the time and effort in terms of long-term viability as a publisher, but you need to have a plan. And you need to ensure that the internal stakeholders are bought into that plan. And once you have that plan and you've got everybody bought in, you need to iterate, you need to tweak, you need to make adjustments, because this is a complex area. And so once you've got everybody aligned, you started your plan, you need to be having some working sessions to ensure that you're, touching on many of the issues that we've touched on today, because from a publisher perspective, it's definitely not set it and forget it. So I think that's what I'd say in closing. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
I think these were all like really insightful answers. So I'm thinking a lot of folks who are undergoing through the same pattern and same journey as well, right? As they transition into a programmatic world, they're going to keep wondering as to like, hey, am I taking all the right steps? Do I need to like go from 0 to 100 in one go, or do I take baby steps along the way? I guess you don't have to go completely full steam ahead and get into that programmatic world with all the bells and whistles right on day one, as opposed to like taking a little bit of like a pause and trying to figure out what are the next steps and strategize towards building that bigger set of strategies and tactics as you get along in the whole journey. But you don't have to necessarily go to it right from day one. That's some of the things that I've heard from you as well. Like you don't have to build out the dynamic floors right from day one. Probably have static floors, learn from that, and iterate and keep testing it out till you actually get it right. And then maybe there's no need for a dynamic floor, but I guess a lot of it is just test and learn along the way. But the other thing I'm hearing is make sure that the stakeholder involvement right from the get-go, have a good plan, make sure there's buy-in as well, and take everyone along in this whole journey. So yeah. Thank you for that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Pavan, for taking the time. I'm going to give a call out to any viewer. If you're enjoying this content, please give me a like, a thumbs up, subscribe. It really does make a difference. And if you have requests for other topics, please put them in the comments below. Thank you again, Pavan.
Thank you very much, James.